Galactic Council mocked the warning. Humans never stop hunting until it was too late. Humans never stop hunting. It wasn't the first time the statement had been made, but it would be the last. Counselor Trivac of the Zorket species tilted his head in amusement, the tips of his long, tapering horns glinting under the soft, artificial lights of the Galactic Council chamber. His eyes, reflective pools of light, studied the lone human envoy before him with condescension. Around him, the other members of the council, all representative of their vastly diverse and ancient species, chuckled under their breath. The envoy, a human named Captain Alice Trevors, stood at the podium, her posture straight and unyielding, but the tension in her eyes betrayed her frustration. She had known the ridicule was coming. It was inevitable. The humans are incapable of understanding the nature of the galactic balance, Counselor Tsar, a hulking creature with segmented limbs and a nearly indestructible exoskeleton, scoffed. Their hunting is nothing more than primitive survivalism. They lack the resources, the unity, and the intelligence to pose any real threat to the order we've built over millennia. Trevors inhaled deeply, her breath steadying her nerves. She had come all this way not for glory or status, but because of a deeply troubling discovery she had made, one that the Galactic Council had refused to take seriously. "I'm afraid you misunderstand," Trevors began, her voice steady despite the weight of their mockery. "The humans have never been what you think they are. You see us as disorganized, weak, and primitive. But there's something you're overlooking. We don't stop hunting." Trivac's eyes narrowed, and the others leaned forward slightly, curious but still unconvinced. "What do you mean, hunting?" Counselor Krefla, an ancient telepathic species, probed. Her tendrils, which extended like a spider's limbs from her central mass, twitched in subtle agitation. "Do you imply that humans would even consider waging war on us?" Preposterous. Trevors didn't flinch. She was prepared for this. "You think we're incapable of it, because we don't possess the same sophisticated weaponry or vast armies as other species. But you're wrong. That's the trap. Humanity doesn't need all of that. We don't need to dominate or overwhelm our enemies, because we're the ones who will never stop pursuing. We hunt until there's nothing left to hunt." A murmur rippled through the council. The words, though simple, carried an unsettling weight. It wasn't about weapons. It wasn't about strategy. It was about persistence, something no one had factored into their calculations. Trivac, still amused, shook his head. "Your race has what? A few decades of spacefaring experience? And you think this hunting instinct will make up for your lack of technological advancement?" "I've seen it," Trevors responded quietly, eyes flashing. "I've seen humanity evolve in ways you don't understand. Your scientists and military minds are so focused on direct power that you miss the more subtle aspects of human strategy. How we learn, how we adapt, how we survive when everything else fails." A ripple of tension passed through the council. No one had ever challenged them like this before. "You're overestimating the potential of your species," Trivac said, his voice cool but firm, "and underestimating the intelligence of the galactic races. Even if you were to wage war against us, which I still find laughable, the combined forces of the Council would crush you in an instant. We've spent centuries maintaining the peace." "Until now," Trevors shot back. "What I'm telling you is that we've already been preparing. We've learned to outlast enemies more powerful than us. We've become a force you cannot easily ignore. And soon you'll see it firsthand." The council sat in silence for a long moment, considering her words. The smug arrogance that had filled the chamber a moment before began to wane. The weight of the unknown began to sink in. "You are dismissed, Captain Trevors," Tsar rumbled finally, his voice dripping with contempt. "I suggest you focus on more realistic matters. Your warnings are nothing more than the delusions of a desperate species." As Trevors turned to leave, she felt the eyes of the council on her, their dismissive stares burning into her back. But she had delivered the message. It was no longer up to her. The time for warnings had passed. She didn't need to convince them anymore. She knew that soon enough they would understand. Too late. Because humans never stop hunting. And the hunt was about to begin. The stars shook. Not from the violent shock waves of war, not from the gravitational upheavals of a collapsing sun, but from the sheer audacity of the humans' arrival. Fleet Commander Jarov of the Zorketh watched through the viewport as the human ships moved into position, their sleek forms cutting through the black void with terrifying precision. It wasn't the size of their fleet that worried him. It was the way they operated. Human technology was nothing like the advanced, elegant machines of the Council species. It was brutish, raw, and efficient. And it was moving far faster than any of the galactic defense forces had predicted. Jarov clenched his mandibles in frustration, trying to push away the nagging feeling in his gut. He'd heard the reports, seen the evidence of the human rise. But nothing had prepared him for the cold, methodical reality of it. "They are moving too quickly," one of his officers, Salek, muttered, staring at the glowing screen. The human ships were darting between defense stations like creatures in the wild, hunting with no regard for the protocol, no regard for the rules of engagement. They were predators, and their prey was every galaxy they could claim. Jarov knew they weren't just invading, they were hunting. "Have they breached the system yet?" Jarov asked, his voice steady, but his heart pounding with increasing uncertainty. "Almost. Their lead fleet is engaging the perimeter defenses now." "Do they expect to break through?" Jarov asked, his mind racing. The Council had thought they were prepared for anything, had made the calculations, assumed the human forces would fall into familiar patterns. Yet the humans weren't acting like anyone else. Salek looked up, eyes wide with disbelief. "They've bypassed half of our defense grids already. The humans they're using, tactics we've never seen before. They're not following our protocols. They're not waiting to attack. They're engaging at odd intervals, whenever they choose. And their ships? They aren't fighting like soldiers. They're fighting like hunters." Jarov leaned forward, his claws digging into the edge of the command console. "Explain." "They attack in flurries. Hit and run. The moment we react, they're gone. Their firepower is secondary. They're keeping us off balance, making us waste energy. Our fleet's divided." Jarov's antennae twitched in agitation. He understood now. The humans were playing the long game. No surprise, no grand spectacle. They were simply methodical, relentless, and willing to grind down everything in their path. They weren't here to win one battle. They were here to outlast every defense, every obstacle, until they could claim victory in the only way that mattered, with nothing left to oppose them. The human strategy wasn't about overwhelming numbers. It was about making every fight a battle of attrition. They were exploiting weaknesses, using deception, and most of all, making sure their enemies were never allowed a moment of peace. Jarov's eyes flicked over to the communication terminal. The Galactic Council had insisted on a live update from the front lines. Salek patched the signal through. A moment later, a harried voice crackled through the speaker. "Fleet Command, this is Captain Arvin of the Midway Defense Station. We've engaged the human fleet, but we're losing ground. The enemy's fire is disorienting. They're exploiting blind spots in our defenses, using stealth technology we thought was outdated. We need reinforcements immediately." The transmission was cut off before they could respond, but Jarov already knew the worst. The human fleet wasn't merely advancing, it was hunting, targeting the weak points and pouncing with surgical precision. Jarov stood abruptly, his claws scraping against the cold metal of the bridge. "We need to warn the Council. This is no longer a matter of defense. This is a hunting ground, and the humans are the apex predators." Salek nodded grimly. "What if they're already too far into the system to stop?" "We'll have to make sure we stop them before they claim the heart of our empire." A cold silence fell over the room as the implication of Jarov's words settled in. They weren't just fighting for control of a single system. If they failed to repel the humans here, it would be the beginning of a much darker future. One where the hunt wouldn't just be for resources, it would be for dominion over every star. The transmission from the Midway Defense Station flickered back to life, this time the voice frantic, barely audible. "Fleet Command, They're using their tactics again. The trap. The transmission cut out once more. Jarv turned toward his tactical officers. Prepare the counteroffensive. We engage immediately. The Council will answer for its failure. As the Zorketh fleet adjusted its course to intercept the human threat, Jarv's thoughts raced. He had underestimated them. The humans were not simply a threat to their fleets. They were an existential threat to the very fabric of the Council itself. And now there was no turning back. The hunt had begun. They called it the Whisper, a name given by the first alien warlord who ever faced it, and lost. It was a strategy, a presence in the battlefield that did not rely on overwhelming force, but on something much worse, relentless precision. And the humans had perfected it. Fleet Commander Jarv had seen it firsthand now, watched his ships scattered, overwhelmed, and butchered in ways no one could have anticipated. The humans were not interested in playing by the rules of conventional warfare. They weren't about to meet him in a fair fight. Instead, they lurked in the darkness, invisible, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. They had made it personal. Jarv paced back and forth in the command center of his ship, every movement calculated, but the weight of his failure crushing his every step. His fleet, once the pride of his species, had been reduced to a mere shadow of itself in a matter of hours. The humans had outmaneuvered them, outthought them, and, worst of all, outlasted them. How many ships have we lost? Jarv asked, his voice hoarse from the tension. 3 more down, Commander. We've managed to evade the majority of their attacks, but it's only a matter of time before they pinpoint our location again, Salak reported, voice tight with suppressed panic. We're being picked off one by one. Jarv's claws scraped against the smooth surface of his desk. It was not supposed to be like this. The human ships, sleek, unassuming, didn't belong here, didn't belong in the grand chessboard of galactic warfare. Yet, somehow, they had turned the tables in ways that made every other race look foolish. Do we know where they are now? Jarv demanded, his eyes burning with frustration. Salak hesitated before answering. Not exactly. They've been using long-range stealth signatures. We think they're using old tech to hide in the electromagnetic waves of the star system. They're not just fighting us, they're hunting us. Jarv slammed a fist against the console. This isn't a war. This is a slaughter. Salak said nothing. The words stuck in his throat. There was no pride in the fight anymore. The Zorketh, once the most feared force in the galaxy, were now nothing more than prey. They were being methodically hunted, and they had no idea how to stop it. Suddenly, the ship's alarms blared, slicing through the heavy air with harsh, shrill warnings. A flashing red light cast an eerie glow across the room. Contact, another officer shouted. Enemy ships incoming, 15 kilometers out, silent mode. Jarv's heart skipped a beat. They had been found. Again. Prepare for immediate combat, Jarv barked, leaping from his seat. Salak, deploy the countermeasures. We fight them now. But even as he barked orders, Jarv's mind raced with a sickening realization. Asterisk, it won't matter. We're already marked, asterisk. Human tactics were a far cry from conventional warfare. The human fleet didn't need to engage head-on to secure victory. They just needed to be in position. And now they were. As the Zorketh fleet readied for another inevitable ambush, a chilling message came through, cutting across their communication lines. This is Captain Alice Trevors of the Earth Navy. The voice came through crisp and cold, eerily calm. You are currently in violation of the hunt. Surrender now, and your species may yet have a future. Resist, and we will continue to track and eliminate your forces, one by one. The choice is yours. The transmission ended abruptly, as if the finality of the words were the punctuation. Jarv's claws trembled, rage bubbling within him, but it was tempered by a dawning horror. They weren't playing by the same rules. They weren't following the same structure, the same expectations. The humans weren't after grand victories or all-out battles. No, they were hunting, stalking their prey with a slow, meticulous hunger that made them all but unstoppable. How are we supposed to respond? Salak asked, voice barely above a whisper. Jarv clenched his fists. We fight. We fight until there's nothing left to fight for. But even as he spoke the words, he knew the truth. They were already dead. The humans weren't after a battle. They were after the end of this war, and they wouldn't stop until every last Zorketh fleet was reduced to dust. They were hunters, and the Zorketh were the prey. The whisper was coming, and soon there would be no one left to stop it. The galaxy had underestimated them. Fleet Commander Jarv sat in silence, his eyes locked on the main screen of the command deck. The vastness of space stretched before him, endless and dark. He could almost hear the hum of his ship as it drifted, knowing the inevitable was coming. He had always believed in the strength of his people, the might of the Zorketh, but now, with the endless hunt closing in, he felt the sting of their fatal mistake. It wasn't just the battle losses. It was the fear creeping through the ranks, the helplessness that gnawed at his soldiers. The humans had struck fast, and they had struck true. Every attempt to regroup had failed. They had become an invisible enemy, a predator that knew its prey better than the prey knew itself. Jarv knew it was only a matter of time before the humans would come for them again. This time, there would be no reinforcements, no escape. Commander, Salek's voice broke the oppressive silence. We've received a message from the Council. They are requesting an update on the situation. Jarv gritted his teeth, the thought of the Council's complacency infuriating him. They had ignored the warnings, dismissed Captain Trevor's advice as desperation. Now they had only themselves to blame. Put it through, Jarv said, his voice low and sharp. A moment later, the holographic image of Counselor Trivac appeared before him, his usual smug expression replaced with something closer to unease. The Zorketh commander didn't waste any time with pleasantries. Jarv, report, Trivac demanded. We've been hearing troubling reports. Why hasn't the fleet made progress? You were supposed to quell this threat, not be crippled by it. Jarv's gaze hardened. The humans are not a threat to be quelled, Trivac. They are a force to be reckoned with. We have underestimated them at every turn. They are hunting us down. Every defensive position we set up has been outmaneuvered. Their strategy, it's unlike anything we've faced before. I don't want excuses, Commander, Trivac snapped. The Council expected a victory. We've invested too much to let this failure continue. Jarv's claws dug into the armrests of his chair, his patience wearing thin. You didn't listen to the warnings. You didn't take Captain Trevor seriously. And now it's too late. For a brief moment, Jarv thought he saw a flicker of realization in Trivac's eyes, but it was quickly replaced with a scornful sneer. You're on your own then, Trivac said, his voice cold. If you can't handle this situation, then we'll handle it another way. The hologram flickered out. Jarv stood up abruptly, fists clenched. He had no faith left in the Council, and he knew there was no one left to turn to. They were on their own. The humans had already sealed their fate. It was only a matter of time before the last of their forces would be wiped out. Commander, Salek's voice again. We've detected a massive surge in energy. Human ships on an intercept course. Jarv's stomach tightened. How long? 20 minutes. Prepare the fleet, he ordered. We face them head-on this time. No more hiding. We either end this now or we perish. As his officers scrambled to implement the orders, Jarv stood by the viewport, his mind a whirlwind of conflicting thoughts. The Zorketh had been a powerful empire once, one that commanded the respect of the entire galaxy. And yet here they were, on the verge of annihilation by a species they had never taken seriously. They were no longer the apex predators. The humans had taken that title from them. The battle began before Jarv had a chance to process the enormity of it. Human ships, sleek and swift, appeared on the radar, their movements almost fluid as they approached the Zorketh fleet. There was no grand spectacle, no call to arms. Just a sudden, silent storm. Contact imminent, Salek reported. Activate all defenses. Launch fighters, Jarv barked. But even as he spoke, he knew it wouldn't matter. The humans were too precise, too patient. The first wave of human ships came in fast, too fast for the Zorketh fleet to react in time. The human stealth tech had them invisible on all tracking systems until the last possible second. And by then, it was already too late. Jarv watched helplessly as his flagship shuddered under the first hit, energy shields flickering under the intense assault. The human ships didn't waste time with anything as unnecessary as communication. They struck with the efficiency of a well-trained predator, targeting weak points and overwhelming the defenses with ease. He had thought they could hold. He had thought they could outlast them. But the humans weren't fighting for territory, for dominance. They were fighting to survive, and they would do whatever it took to ensure their victory. Minutes into the engagement, Jarv received the worst possible news. "Commander, we've lost contact with the outer fleet," one of his officers said, her voice trembling. "They've been completely wiped out." Jarv's heart sank. There was no saving them. The humans had moved through the outer fleet like hunters picking off stragglers. No hesitation, no mercy. "We've lost," Jarv muttered under his breath, the weight of it crushing him. But it wasn't over yet. The Zorketh were fighters. They would not go down without a struggle. He turned back to his crew, his voice steady once more. "Hold your positions. We fight to the last ship. We'll make them pay for every inch they take." But deep down, he knew the truth. The humans had already marked them. The price of survival wasn't something they could afford. The hunter had become the hunted. It was the last gamble. Fleet Commander Jarv knew it, his officers knew it, and even the remaining soldiers aboard his fleet understood. There would be no turning back. The humans had decimated the Zorketh defenses with relentless precision, hunting them like prey across the stars. This was their final stand, a last-ditch effort to fend off the inevitable. The humans weren't interested in taking prisoners. They didn't fight for glory or for territory, or for any of the noble reasons the Zorketh had once believed in. They fought to survive, and they fought to win. And Jarv could already feel the weight of their victory. "Status report," Jarv growled, turning to his officer. "Enemy ships are inbound," Salak reported, his voice clipped. "They've already bypassed our first line of defense. Their fleet is moving in for the final strike." "Let them come," Jarv said coldly. "We will make our stand here." There was no other option. The Zorketh fleet was cornered, the last remnants of their forces hanging in the balance, vulnerable and exposed. Every failed tactic, every miscalculation, had led them to this point. Now they were faced with one final choice: resist or be eradicated. "Deploy all remaining ships to the front line," Jarv ordered, a fire burning in his chest. "We'll make them pay for every inch they take." He didn't believe it would work. He didn't even believe they could win. But for the first time in his life, Jarv realized there was no pride left to protect. It was about survival now. It was about showing the humans that the Zorketh had the strength to fight until the end. The Zorketh fleet scattered into formation, weapons powering up, shields glowing as they prepared for one final battle. And as Jarv watched the human ships emerge from the darkness of space, a chilling thought crossed his mind. What if this was the beginning of the end for all of them? The human ships were smaller than the Zorketh warships, but they were faster, more efficient, and deadlier than anything Jarv had ever encountered. They had mastered the art of warfare in a way the Zorketh never had. Where the Zorketh relied on strength, the humans relied on cunning. And it was that very cunning that had already turned the tide of this war. The first salvo came as a surprise, a wave of missiles that struck with brutal force. The Zorketh shields flared as the missiles made contact, but they weren't strong enough. One ship exploded in a burst of light, debris scattering across the void. Then another, and another. Jarv's heart sank. Even with the last of their fleet assembled, the humans were cutting through them like a blade through paper. Enemy fighters inbound. Salak shouted over the din of alarms. "We can't hold them off much longer." Jarv looked out into space, watching as the human fleet advanced with terrifying precision. There was no retreat now, no way to regroup. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and outmatched in every sense of the word. And yet, the Zorketh fought on. For a fleeting moment, Jarv thought back to the time before the war, when the Zorketh had been proud and unchallenged, when they had believed themselves to be invincible. The memories felt like a lifetime ago. "We fight until the last," Jarv muttered, his voice filled with resolve. "We fight until there's nothing left to fight for." But even as he spoke the words, his thoughts flickered to the humans again. The hunter was relentless. The Zorketh had long been a predator, but they were now the hunted. The battle raged on. The Zorketh ships fired their remaining weapons, but the humans didn't flinch. They dodged, they adapted, they fought like creatures born for combat, born for survival. Every Zorketh countermeasure seemed futile. Every last salvo from their fleet fell short. And then, just as Jarv began to believe there was nothing left to do, something shifted. One of the human ships made a mistake, a small one, but enough to tip the scales. A Zorketh cruiser took advantage of the opening, firing a direct shot that ruptured the human ship's engine core. The explosion was massive, sending shock waves through space. For a moment, Jarv allowed himself to feel a flicker of hope. Could it be? Could they still turn the tide? But it was too late. The humans, ever the hunters, responded immediately. They adapted, corrected their mistake, and struck back with double the force. Jarv watched as the last of his fleet burned away, as his people were hunted to extinction. He knew in that moment that the Zorketh were finished. They were no longer the predators. They were nothing more than the prey. As the darkness of space closed in around him, Jarv knew the truth. The hunt had always been inevitable. The humans had never stopped hunting. And now, the Zorketh were gone, lost to history. The hunter had claimed his prize. The galaxy had changed overnight. The once proud Zorketh Empire, which had ruled vast sectors of space with unmatched power, was now nothing more than a memory. In its place, something far more unsettling was emerging. The humans had claimed their victory, but it wasn't just a battle they had won. It was an entire shift in the galactic balance. Captain Alice Trevors stood on the bridge of the human flagship, watching as the final remnants of the Zorketh fleet were scattered across the void, their once mighty ships reduced to floating wreckage. Her gaze was cold, calculating. The war was over, but the real work was only beginning. The humans weren't just here to conquer. They were here to reshape the galaxy. "Captain," a voice interrupted her thoughts. Lieutenant Ree stood beside her, a holographic map of the galaxy projected before them. "We've received confirmation. All major Zorketh strongholds have been taken. The council members are already preparing to surrender." Alice nodded, her expression unreadable. "Good, but don't get comfortable. This isn't just about taking worlds. It's about the future." She could feel the weight of her words. The humans had made their mark on the galaxy, and now it was time to turn the tide, to forge a new order. No more complacency. No more outdated empires. The galaxy would be shaped by a new force, one that understood survival and strength like no other. "We'll begin with the council members," Alice continued. "They're the key to the entire structure of this galaxy. Once we have them in place, we can start rebuilding." The bridge fell silent as the officers began their work, coordinating the next phase of their campaign. Alice watched the vastness of space outside the viewport, the stars seemingly indifferent to the destruction below. But she knew the truth. This was only the beginning. The galaxy was waking up to a new reality. The Galactic Council had once been an unshakable institution, a symbol of unity across the stars. They had believed their power was inviolable, their reign absolute. But now, as they scrambled to secure the last of their territories, they realized just how wrong they had been. Counselor Trivac, the last surviving leader of the Zorketh, paced nervously in his chamber, the harsh lights casting long shadows across the walls. His once mighty species had been humbled, and with them the entire council. "I told you," Trivac muttered bitterly to himself, his mind racing. "I told you we should have taken them seriously." But the humans were relentless. They had obliterated every defense the Zorketh had put in place, dismantled the council's hold on the galaxy, and now they were demanding submission. Trivac had no choice but to comply. The humans had shown no mercy, and his people had been reduced to a shell of their former selves. The communication console on his desk buzzed to life, and Trivac froze. his heart pounding. He knew what was coming. Counselor Trivac. Alice's voice came through the screen, crisp and authoritative. It's time to talk. Trivac swallowed hard. He had no illusions about the outcome of this meeting. The humans had already won. There was no negotiation, no bargaining. They had come to take control, and nothing would stop them. We are ready to listen, Captain Trevors, Trivac said, his voice tight, unwilling to show the extent of his fear. What is it you want? The galaxy, Alice replied simply. The old order is gone. The council has failed. And now, we're here to make sure it never rises again. Trivac's face twisted with anger, but he forced himself to remain calm. You think you can replace us? You think you can control everything? You're just a species of scavengers. Alice didn't flinch. We've already done it, and we'll continue to do it. This isn't about dominance for the sake of power, Trivac. It's about survival. And in this galaxy, only those who understand that can rule. The rest will be swept aside. She paused, letting her words hang in the air, a cold promise of what was to come. You may be the last of your kind, Trivac. The Zorketh may be a story for the history books. But humanity? We will rebuild the galaxy. We will unite the survivors. We will forge alliances with those who want to live. And we will ensure that peace is maintained on our terms. Trivac's lips curled into a grimace. And what of those who oppose you? They'll be dealt with, Alice said, her tone chillingly calm. Those who fight against us will join the Zorketh in the void. As the transmission ended, Trivac sank into his chair, his mind spinning. The humans had already won. There was no going back. Alice stood in the war room, her officers gathered around the table. The holographic map of the galaxy flickered with new data as more and more systems fell under their control. The work was far from over, but the foundation was set. The humans had proven themselves as hunters, and now they were going to show the galaxy what it meant to be the dominant force. We'll need to consolidate our power quickly, Alice said, addressing the officers. The Zorketh are gone, but there are still remnants of the old empire out there. It's time to send a message. A lieutenant nodded. What's the first step, Captain? Alice's eyes hardened. We start by taking the strongest of the old alliances. We offer peace to those who'll accept it. Those who resist will face the same fate as the Zorketh. The galaxy was theirs now, and Alice knew one thing above all else. Humanity would not stop hunting until every last obstacle had been removed. The galaxy would be remade. Under humanity's rule, there would be no more complacency, no more empires that believed they were untouchable. The new order had arrived, and it would never be the same again.